Mayday on moon of Jupiter. Mayday! 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 Justin Marsden pulled back on the steering column with his right hand while hammering on the autopilot controller with his left. We're going down, Justin's co-pilot and twin sister Alicia said in a calm, matter-of-fact voice. Do something! He shouted frantically, giving the panel a punch that cracked the touchscreen display. Alicia shot him a sideways look. She was already doing something. She was the one calling Mayday for help. We have to eject, she told him. I'm the captain, and this is my space pod. Justin grabbed the steering shaft with both hands and yanked back on it, trying to force the manual controls. If this baby crashes, I'll crash with her. Don't be silly. Alicia's long, dark hair fell forward over her face as she reached under her seat. According to the mission manual, page 6, paragraph 2, there's only one thing to do in a situation like this. She glared at her brother, then twisted a glowing red knob. The next thing Justin knew, he was lying on the ground, battered and bruised. His back hurt. He had a headache, and he was freezing cold. Justin struggled to stand up, only to discover he was wearing a special protective crash suit, complete with a heavy oxygenated helmet. That explained the headache. In an emergency, the suit emerged from the pod's seat back and wrapped itself gently around the flyer. The helmet, however, dropped like a lead from the ceiling. He groaned and shook off the pain radiating from the top of his skull. The helmet visor made it difficult to judge exactly where he had crash landed. There was a reflection in the mask that showed his own dark brown eyes staring back at him. Justin stood up. Ugh! He slipped and immediately crashed back down onto the hard, firm ground. Leaning up on an elbow, Justin looked around. Ice, smooth and slick like a skating rink, stretched out in every direction. Moving slowly, Justin managed to stand again and took a cautious step forward. Alicia, he called. It was bad enough that he had crash-landed on an unfamiliar planet. Worse, that he had dragged his sister into this mess. Alicia, where are you? The freezing wind made him shiver. Justin sighed. For months he had begged his parents to let him go on this mission. They argued that he was too young. He argued that he could handle it. Finally, they agreed, as long as Alicia went along too. She didn't want to go. She didn't like leaving Earth. But Justin couldn't go without her. So he did everything he could think of to get her in the pod. He folded her laundry and cleaned her room. He even promised he would do her chores for a year. Alicia, where are you? Justin surveyed the ice-crusted planet. The land around him was dotted with frozen hills and jagged cliff faces. Alicia? There was no reply. Alicia! Justin? Her voice came from behind the smoldering wreckage of the pod. Over here! The cabin of the ship was lying on its side and smelled like burning rubber. A gaping hole in the side of the fuselage revealed scattered equipment and melted wiring. Alicia was sitting on a hunk of severed aluminum, holding the charred remains of the mission manual. Page 8, paragraph 3, she read. The crew may not stray from the ship. Alicia! Justin slipped and stumbled his way to her, and after skidding to a stop, gave her a hug. You promised nothing bad would happen. She didn't hug him back. You never keep your promises. Arms pinned to her side, she said, I bet you were never really going to do my chores at all. Justin didn't reply. He moved clumsily away, staring down at the ice. Alicia wrapped her arms around herself and asked, in a weak voice, "Can you get us home?" Guilt settled in his chest as Justin studied the space pod. He could fix almost anything. But without the right parts, there was no way to repair the damage. The pod was ruined. He told her the truth. No. Justin stared out towards the skyline. He could see the Jovian rings of Jupiter glowing in the distance. Several of Jupiter's moons glinted with reflected light from the sun. "This isn't Jupiter, is it?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. Alicia pointed to a massive planet in the distance. "We shot past it. Must have happened after the iron core reactor dried out." Justin wrung his gloved hands together. "Looks like the backup power booster gave one last boost before it died." He looked at the ship. "Do you think Mom and Dad heard the Mayday?" Alicia shrugged. "I doubt it." Justin nodded. "Well, then, what does the manual say to do now?" She showed him a chapter titled Interstellar Survival. "We have to hang out here until Mom and Dad figure out where we've gone and send help." Scooting along the slick ice, Alicia moved toward the hole in the side of the spacecraft. This is Europa. It's the sixth closest moon to Jupiter, similar to Earth in that the crust is made mostly of silicate rock. And she released a pressure valve on her helmet. "There's no atmosphere, but there is oxygen." Alicia lay on her belly and slipped inside the pod. A minute later, she came back with the ship's emergency kit. She handed it to her brother. He surveyed the contents: a long rope, a space flare, and an empty canteen. There were several empty spots. "I should probably have checked the kit before liftoff," Justin frowned. "We need heat, food, and a radiation shield to help protect us," Alicia told him. "Oh, and a way to send another Mayday signal." "Heat?" Justin's teeth chattered. The pod had a hole in it. "Food?" Alicia looked at the empty spots in the emergency kit, where the rations should have gone. "No," Justin shook his head. "Communications?" she asked. He shook his head again. There was no point in asking about the radiation shield. With a frustrated sigh, Alicia began to flip through the manual as if the answer to their problem was hidden somewhere in the pages. Europa is a little bigger than our own moon. It'll rotate around to this spot in Jupiter's orbit in 3.5 days, she said. The most important thing is the shield. In an hour, the radiation will increase. Without protection, we'll die. She turned the manual so he could see a picture in the appendix. "Ew, gross!" Justin turned his head away. He was not going to let that happen to them. An hour? There had to be something he could do. The Martian 8 mission consisted of 8 ships headed to the 8 planets of Earth's solar system in search of evidence of early life forms. The next closest ship had gone to Mars. That was 93 million miles away. Saturn was about 406 million miles from where they stood at this time in the orbital cycle. "Even if I can get the communication system up," he said, "it'll take a pod too long to get here. We have to repair the shield." "How?" Alicia gave him a look that made the guilty feeling in Justin's gut grow stronger. I don't know. There was no choice. It was life or death. Justin had to try. Using all his strength, he peeled off a broken panel on the outside of the space pod. The heart of the ship was completely fried. The wiring was cinder. The components blackish with ash. He tossed the trashed parts aside and focused on finding the one thing he might be able to use. Good news! The casing for the iron fusion reactor was completely intact. Justin tugged the device away from the wiring and stepped back from the ship. The baseball-sized fusion reactor was Justin's own invention. While other ships used cold fusion, Justin had replaced his reactor with one that used iron at the core and could fuse most any other material. As long as there was water buffering the compounds, the reactor could provide unlimited energy. He was planning to tell his parents all about it after the mission was a success. Unfortunately, halfway to Jupiter, the water evaporated. Justin hadn't accounted for the need to refill. If we can find water, I can get the pod's radiation shields up and running and generate enough power to start up the communications system, Justin told Alicia. I can even get us heat. Let's melt some of this ice, Alicia suggested. She took the flare from the emergency kit and cracked it. The light glowed green. Chemiluminescence, she said, pinching her lips. No sparks. Suddenly, a frozen wind blew with such force it knocked Justin backwards. Whoa! He fell on the ice, and the small fusion reactor slipped from his hands and rolled away. He shouted to Alicia, "Get the orb!" "We can't leave the ship," Alicia cried as Justin threw himself forward and slid across the moon's rough surface. Paragraph, forget the manual! Justin bumped over a lumpy part of a frozen moon surface that had dark brown crisscross lines embedded in the ice. We need that reactor! Quickly glancing over his shoulder, he could see Alicia's look of doubt as she set down the booklet. She took a running leap and belly flopped onto the ice, flying forward with such speed that she passed Justin by. Way to go, Alicia! 1 second, Alicia was in front of him. The next, she had disappeared from the moon's surface. Ah! Alicia! Justin dragged his feet and stopped. Alicia was nowhere in view. He'd lost her. Again. Alicia? I found the reactor, she said. Her voice echoed softly and far away. Justin moved to the edge of a deep crack. The reactor was no longer his main concern. Are you hurt? Alicia was so far down the crevice that he could barely see the top of her helmet. I'm okay, her voice echoed. Tie this around your waist. Justin dropped the emergency rope down to her. Ready, she said. Then, no, wait! Send the canteen first. Why? He asked. It's empty. Trust me, Alicia told him. Justin passed her the canteen and then walked back to the ship. He tied his end of the rope around the heaviest piece of twisted metal. Justin and Alicia worked together to pull her out of the crevice. Here, she handed him the canteen. What is it? He twisted off the lid and smelled the contents. Water? Then cheered. Water! Justin grinned. As long as we have water, we can stay as long as we need to. He filled the iron fusion reactor. It immediately began to glow a healthy orange. He repaired the radiation shield while Alicia contacted their parents. Help was on the way. While we're hanging out, I think I'll read the mission manual, Justin said, picking up the thick booklet. Page 1, paragraph 1. You don't need to read it. Alicia gave her brother a crushing hug. I'll come along on your next voyage and tell you what you need to know. Very excited, she explained. You did a good job, Justin. This mission was a huge success. It was? Justin asked, wrinkling his eyebrows. He glanced at Jupiter, the planet where they should have landed. It feels like a failure. Do you know what we found? Alicia laughed at Justin's blank stare. We found water. That's the first sign of potential life. She shook the canteen. Under the sea on Earth, way down by the core, plants and animals can grow. Maybe that's happening here too. Sounds like there's a lot more exploring to be done on Europa, Justin agreed. I can't wait. Alicia leaned back and watched the stars twinkle. It'll be an adventure. Justin looked at his sister and smiled. I promise.